Hello, I don't know how many of you have seen the Andrew Lloyd Webber show Cinderella. It's not really very good. The show itself is not really very good, but the cast and the performances are exemplary. And it closed yesterday or the day before. And the curtain call was extraordinary. First of all, Andrew Lloyd Webber wasn't in the theatre, which is astonishing given the hands on approach that he took to the opening of the show. But he asked his director to read a letter. And the letter was probably, I think one of the nastiest things that I've heard in the theatre, but it seems to me symptomatic of the sort of society we are currently creating. He called the show a costly mistake, and it was almost a blow against the very hard-working cast and technicians, and it's not the sort of thing that one should be saying. He was booed, and rightly so. I think he's a scurrilous and unpleasant individual. I thought so for some time. There are rumours, there have always been stories that most of his tunes are stolen from other works, and often from rejigging a piece of classical music. One can never fault him for his orchestrations, which were sublime. I mean, they've become pretty hollow with the reduction of the size of pit orchestras in the modern West End, but his orchestrations are stupendous. Now, I'd say this is symptomatic of our age. I don't know whether it's COVID, I don't know whether it's Brexit, maybe a bit of both, but we've got into a habit of being cheap, 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 and Lloyd Webber is, of course, the embodiment of cheap, 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 and and dishonourable. Why are we surprised? People. I've heard of people taking up jobs, and the terms change the moment they walk in the door. The jobs simply stop when somebody refuses to pay. You find that that you're not given holiday pay, and you're not given this, and you're not given that, and different ways of just being fleeced dishonorably. And the employers are assuming, and Lloyd Webber, for example, is assuming that his cast and employees are simply going to comply because they have a sense of worth about what they are doing. Of course they do. And it's time, I think it's time that we challenged this cheapness that has come into our country. I think it's being led by our appalling government, by this cadre of cheap individuals who do not seem capable of doing their job. I mean, the other day, Liz Truss couldn't actually pronounce some. Well, she was talking about the tea sock, the tea sock in Ireland. The tea sock in Ireland. It sounds like an article of clothing. It's just extraordinary that she is so ill-informed and so useless. So it's not only geography she doesn't know, she just doesn't know how to address people and how to talk about people with whom presumably she interacts on a regular basis. Why should we be led by these people who have set a standard, and that standard is cheap, 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 cheap? And I despair. I despair that you can't get a direct answer out of people until it's too late. I despair that we're being manipulated and cajoled and pressured into doing things because what is it? What is it? Because those people who are in the business of employing others, like Andrew Lloyd Webber, They think their caste is so desperate that they will accept any breadcrumbs that are offered by the great Lord Lloyd Webber. They think we are so desperate. It's time to turn around and say that's not the case. It's time to turn around and say, you know, honour starts at the top. Something that you agree verbally is something that you implement practically. You can't change your terms simply because you've got to put your money in, you've got to put your hand in your pocket. There used to be a point when Britain was famous for, its word. That seems to have gone. That seems to have gone, and I think it's. I wouldn't go so far as to say the rot starts with Priti Patel and Liz Truss and Nadine Dorries. I think the rot was set sometime before that. I think the rot goes back to an obsession with bureaucracy, playing games with bits of paper. Enough is enough.